Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, our special guest is Elena Turley. Elena is an award-winning educator, mentor, podcaster, and martial artist. Most importantly, though, she's personally walked the path down to the depths of depletion, infertility, mental health challenges, and early childhood trauma and domestic violence. She's followed a pathway of intense healing that has brought her to this important work. Elena's vision is to spearhead intergenerational change by inviting women to step into their role as conscious custodians, be members of their nurturing communities, and heal their traumas, both big and small. So, Elena, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, I know you had a longer bio, so what would you like to contribute or add?
I guess the main thing is just that I'm really thrilled to be able to do the work that I do now. And it's taken a while, I had to get a few qualifications and I had to learn to be an educator and get a black belt in martial arts, in Hapkido, in the Korean art of Hapkido. And now I get to help mothers just every day, going from burnout and depletion and stress and sometimes trauma, who desperately need a minute for themselves, who feel overwhelmed, who just are yearning for those moments of joy but not getting to them. So my whole mission now is to help women in that position, because I've been that woman. So I'm sure there are listeners of your podcast who either are that woman or know someone like that. And it's very common, so now I really love to just do that work and offer that to women in a membership and also personally. So, yeah, I live with my 3 kids in Sydney in Australia and a dog. And, yeah, my life's changed a lot.
Okay. What about your early life are you willing to share with us today that led you to the path you're on?
So I guess the thing to know is that, back in the 70s when I was born in Australia, there wasn't a lot of support for mothers who were single. And my parents split up when I was, I think, 4 weeks old the first time. And so my mother had to go to work, and it wasn't until I was well into my late 20s, early 30s that I realized the great impact that has on a child to be separated from their mother. And there's no blame here about that, but it was just a situation that she had to survive. She had to navigate without a lot of support. And I guess that informs a lot of what I do now, because it had a massive impact on me in ways that I could not have foreseen, because you don't remember early life trauma, right? And the more I learn, the more I understand how those things contribute to who we are. Now we have those incredible studies on the adversity in childhood and the ACEs scores and all those sorts of things, which just give us an understanding. But those things are relatively recent in the world of psychology and trauma healing. So it's fascinating to have navigated that without knowing that that's what was at play. I just kind of spent the first 20 or 30 years of my life really wandering around, wondering why I didn't feel good, and often self-medicating with addictions or falling into unhealthy relationships. And yeah, it's a powerful thing to walk that path.
Yeah. And your bio mentions some domestic violence. Was that more than one partner or just one partner? Yeah.
It was more than one partner. I think I had 2 main experiences of domestic violence in the kind of definitive sense. One of them, I was attacked at home, and the man that attacked me was most definitely psychotic at the time. So he imprisoned me and he threatened me with a weapon and fortunately, I remembered some of my martial arts training from years earlier and
Wow.
kind of managed to escape after a couple of hours. But it was very heavy. And you know, the police came and we went through the courts and he broke his, you know, we have orders that you're supposed to stay away from the victim. He didn't stay away. So that it was a very difficult time. And that launched me into about a year, I would say, of really deep PTSD, which again, you don't know you're in it when you're in it, right?
Right. Is this someone you knew, or was this a stranger?
Yeah. No, it was a partner who I'd separated from.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that took some healing.
Yeah, it really did. And then the second time it was more, I mean, we were both, I think, playing out our trauma in our relationship, and it was more of an emotional abuse situation, less physical. Again, which I didn't define as domestic violence until, you know, afterwards, when I was a single mother, a lot like my mother, ended up on my own with a young baby, and I went to a support group at the encouragement of a friend, and she said, come to our support group. And I said, well, I can't. He never hit me. And she said, that's not the only kind of domestic violence. You know, there's abuse and there's covert abuse and there's so many different ways. And it took me a long while to understand that is very damaging. And I was allowed to get help for that, you know. It was very interesting.
So for our listeners who may not know they're in a toxic or a domestic violence situation, what was it that happened that was like, this really is? Is it just like you mentioned with your friend, or were there other aha moments maybe?
I think, you know, when, again, I had some neighbours who called the police when they heard us fighting and they were scared for us. That was a bit of a wake up. And I had other movements. I was pregnant for, you know, a lot of that relationship. And I had these other moments. I was under a lot of stress and there was some financial control and it was really difficult, you know, and I would get very triggered with my own early life stuff and I would hurt myself. Like I would race out onto the street crying and run into a tow bar was one thing that happened. I had, you know, my leg was bleeding and I went home and the response was not one of compassion, you know, it was one of abuse. And that was a big wake up moment. And I think I spent a lot of it trying to kind of numb myself to what was going on. But it was, you know, family and friends were concerned. I had a girlfriend come to me and talk to me very honestly and say she couldn't stand by and watch it. That was another one. And then when it ended and I had to find somewhere to live with my baby and I went to this local community centre and I did a little self-esteem course, it was called. And they showed us the cycle of abuse.
Oh, yeah, the wheel.
And the wheel. And I identified with it so strongly. And that was, again, you know, there's layers, so many layers to that. And I think often from my experience of listening to other women who've been in this position, often you kind of know, part of you knows, but you may not be ready, sometimes for reasons of survival, you may not be ready to accept that knowing, or you may not have the support to be able to, you know.
Mm-hmm. Very true, yeah. So what was the most healing step that you took during your recovery?
That's a great question. I guess probably the biggest turning point from that moment on, there were a few again. One was when, you know, still in love with the person and still wanting to be in the relationship in some ways, knowing it was no good for me and my son, but also knowing there was a lot of love, you know. It's not always that there's not a lot of love there. And it was a really big moment when that person wanted to be back in my life and I said no. And it was potentially one of the hardest things I've ever done, actually, I think. And then, you know, even another year later, starting to heal my own self-medicating addictions, my own habits of being attracted to situations or people that were not healthy for me or unsupportive of me. That was another big step doing enough healing and really pursuing healing so that I wasn't just repeating it, you know. And that took years and years, you know, 5 years. And then I think probably the biggest step I ever took was marrying someone completely different, you know, like actually creating a different life and creating a different type of family and being very clear, owning my part in it. You know, I don't actually blame the person that attacked me. I don't blame the father of my son in any way. I actually feel a lot of love for them. And I think that when you can understand, and not necessarily when you're in it, you know, because that can help you excuse people for things they're doing that hurt you, but looking back on it with healing, and I do see that actually being able to forgive is a really, really powerful thing to do, and it frees you, it disconnects you in a way, I think, from a lot of the damage. But you can't cheat it. Yeah. You can't cheat that one.
Yeah, for sure. For women who are finding it extremely difficult or impossible to forgive, any words of encouragement for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is when you're ready. Okay, so this is in your own time, when you can, when you have it in you. I really recommend that you have a really big, hard look at your part in it. And again, not without compassion, not without huge helpings of self-compassion, but when you're ready to have a really good look at how you participated in that situation, sometimes that can free you up, because if you can forgive yourself for having been and done those things, been in those things and done those things, and staying when, you know, you could have left, or all of the different versions of that story, when you can forgive yourself, I think that can then flow on to understanding, you know, and from understanding comes, I guess, freedom.
Yeah, what you're saying about ownership with the adult relationships makes sense to me.
Yes,
but what about children in abusive situations?
So I can't speak to that from my own experience. I definitely had some adverse experiences in my childhood, but and there was certainly some covert abuse in my family, but nothing more sinister for me. So I can only speak to my experience. And other members of my family had a different experience, and it's very different for them. For me, I guess I can sort of segregate a little bit. I can segregate what I need to do to heal myself and what they didn't do to heal themselves, right? So I can hold them accountable and hold them responsible without bitterness, I guess. Yeah. And there's a big distinction there. There's a key distinction there that I think allows you freedom. And sometimes you don't have to forgive, but maybe you can let go of the bitterness for your own well-being.
Yeah. I agree. That would be really helpful when possible. And if it's not possible yet, keep working at it.
Right. Yeah. Right. And what I'm kind of touching on is, can you allow that possibility? Like, as ridiculous as it might seem, for yourself.
And did you work with any therapists or healers during your healing journey?
Yeah, so countless. You know, I spent a lot of years working with a lot of different people, and you kind of never know where the turning points are going to come. And I think that I just kept going, and I still keep going. That's not something that ever ends for me. It's an ongoing, you know, constant. I know some people that I speak to, they say, when will I be better? You know, like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I can't do this work anymore. And the only thing that I found could kind of get me through that feeling was, first of all, to come to a place of safety in my life and find that, you know, relentlessly seek that place of safety. But secondly, to fall in love with the process, to make it self-mastery, to make it, you know, my life's quest. It's no longer, fortunately for me, it's no longer about the past. It's no longer really about escaping something or, survival. It's actually now become about self-mastery and service. How can I serve other people? And I think that's a very big stage and a big step. And so I love doing self-development and personal development because it opens me up to serve more,
Yeah. No, I love what you're saying. And I have a membership as well for survivors. And one of the things that we talk about is healing yourself, but also reaching out to the woman behind you that you may be a couple steps ahead of, and trying to assist them as well. Yeah,
that's amazing work that you do.
Well, likewise, tell us more about the work that you're doing now. Like you said, a membership. Like, tell us what courses or coaching. Tell us more about what you do.
So I work as a one-on-one mentor with women who are in early to mid-motherhood. I would say that they often actually start to look out and up when their children go to school or are school age. And I find that is the point at which a lot of the women that come to me are ready to start to look at what they need and start to look at, what purpose they want to fill beside and beyond motherhood. And sometimes some big stuff comes up because that's when you need to feel confident to step into maybe a new role, a new career, a new course of study. And it can be really challenging. And you're also often at that point experiencing a level of deep depletion from pouring yourself out as a mother, So I really love to work with mothers in a few different ways. One is one-on-one, but the membership is actually more about there's a program, there's a 5-stage program where we take women through from awareness to purpose. I know I need more than my day-to-day life to feel fulfilled, and I want to serve. I have a big dream. I want to be a change maker in the world, but I'm exhausted and I can't sleep properly because my children wake me up and I'm stressed, and my never-ending to-do list stops me ever getting to anything more, and all that stuff. And my confidence is at the lowest it's ever been. I don't know who I am anymore. Those sorts of feelings come up. So I work with women in a really holistic sense to go from that stage to, okay, I'm ready to go out in the world. I have support. I have a beautiful community of other women, and I'm clear and aligned with my purpose, So that's the sort of transformation. And sometimes it's something more traumatic. I've had some women come in whose families are in turmoil because somebody in the family has experienced a trauma. And so they're so all embroiled in that they can't look after themselves properly, and they start to get very depleted. I've had other women who are recovering from difficult relationships. There's a lot of different versions of that woman.
Right. And the commonalities are?
The commonalities are generally that these women have a big vision for their lives, but something is stopping them, and they don't quite know how to get past it. Yeah, and they feel disconnected. The one thing I get a lot is they feel disconnected from themselves, and they feel disconnected from those around them, from the people that they want to be closest to.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. Yeah. As a therapist, is not feeling in sync with yourself, and then not feeling. And how can you be in sync with in your relationships with others if you're not in 100%. Sync with yourself? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's a really common human experience in our world as well. The way that our world is arranged and organized, and our culture, our Western culture, it doesn't favor connection, And there's also a little bit of, for women, there's still a bit of systemic inequality that makes it difficult for women to step into their power, and step into their biggest life. So I like to empower women to navigate that.
Now, how has your personal and professional transformation impacted your parenting?
A lot. I mean, this is a big area of what I do. And the blog, I started a blog in 2009, and it started with a lot of articles about parenting, and I call what I do now, I call it soulful parenting. And it's a combination of a million different things that I've learned over the years. And it really, the biggest impact from doing this kind of personal development is that my children feel very close to me and I feel very close to them. And we are able to experience a whole gamut of emotion, of the struggles and challenges that they face as they grow. You know, I have a 19-year-old, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I kind of have kids at lots of different stages and they need lots of different things. But I guess the biggest impact is that I'm conscious and aware. I'm just conscious and aware of when my stuff is coming into play, and I'm able to own that and talk to them about it and give them an understanding of that. Obviously, when they're verbal, when they're younger, it's more about just attachment, you know. I'm able to be a kind of attachment style, a conscious parent, even though maybe I didn't experience that throughout my childhood.
Right.
So, yeah, it's navigating all the stuff that comes up for you enough that you can still just be there.
I love the term soulful parenting.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. Really beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. And along your journey, I do a lot of reading. I call it bibliotherapy.
Cool.
Well, I didn't term that, but I relate to that term. Do you have favorite books that you usually recommend to your clients? Or favorite
Oh my
books for
gosh, so
journey?
many. It changes all the time. You can see I've got a pile behind me.
I did see that.
Yeah.
Maybe your top three.
Oh, this is too difficult. It really depends. It really depends who it is and who I'm working with. A few that come to mind. There's a new book that's just come out by some aware parenting experts in Australia called Raising Compassionate and Resilient Kids by Lael Stone and Marion Rose. So I'd love to give them some props. It's a very new book. It's too hard. Sometimes I recommend things like The Hormone Cure by Dr. Sarah Gottfried. That talks about holistic ways to heal hormone imbalances. That can be quite big. And then another amazing one is The Postnatal Depletion Cure by Dr. Oscar Saralach, also an Australian author. But, you know, any books by Gabor Mate, obviously.
Oh, I love him.
And, yeah, there's so many more. Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. Yeah. But I actually have a bookshelf on my blog as well.
I'll check that out too.
I'll link to it if you like. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah,
the postnatal book, can you say the title one more time?
Yeah, sure. Postnatal Depletion Cure.
That sounds like a great title too.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah, because you mentioned that's one of the things that you help women with is depletion. That word is powerful.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I started using it before I found the work of Dr. Saralach. So I came to that from my own experience and the experience of women I worked with. And then I found that there's this man who's dedicated his life, him and his wife, to curing it. And he's a GP, or what you would call an MD. So it's a really amazing thing that they're doing incredible work. And they're very much coming from a holistic health perspective and a medical perspective. But it's fantastic. And they do retreats and amazing. That's their whole thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that you have other obligations today, so I don't want to keep you a long time.
Unfortunately, because I would love to keep talking to you, Karen.
Likewise, and I'm happy to connect with you outside of our time here together.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask you, there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask you, but maybe something I'm curious about, like I noticed that you were drinking your tea.
Yes.
So, which is beautiful. Mm-hmm. What kind of tips or routines do you have throughout your day that kind of are soothing that could other women listening could maybe practice? You know, it doesn't have to be big things, but little tips.
Yeah, sure.
That can be healing.
So I'm a big fan of the 1-minute meditation. You know, often we don't have time to meditate, or we think we don't have time. So I'm always saying to people, just start from where you are. Start from where you're at right now. If you are feeling that your nervous system has been activated, there's so many things that you can do. Tea is one good one. drinking a calming tea, hydrating is a really simple but important one that keeps our nervous system in check. And then when it needs a little more juice, you can sit and meditate for 1 minute. There's actually a bazillion 1-minute meditations online. I do a 3-minute meditation on my own podcast. It's like episode 3 or something. And, breath work. And breath work actually doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. But the other thing I'll often do is just movement, whatever that means. It can be cleaning. It can be walking around your house. Like, it doesn't have to be anything big. Gardening is movement, so anything that gets your body moving. And water, looking at water. If you can find your way to some water and look at it, it just works wonders. And so just all those really simple things. And I think just rest can never be overrated. Is that thing that you feel like you have to do today actually urgent today? Or can you sit down, read a book, call a friend? Like, can you stop just for a minute and take stock and become present, So that's they're basically mindfulness exercises.
No, beautiful though. Okay, well, do you have any questions for me?
I have a lot of questions for you, Karen. I think really I want to know, why do you do the work you do?
Oh, that's a great question too. I do the work I do because I too am a survivor or a thriver of childhood abuse, domestic violence in my home, unhealthy, toxic relationships and work environments. So I feel like I picked up a lot of trips and tips not ticks, no ticks, during my journey. And then I really wanted not to be poor. I grew up in poverty, so getting an education was super important to me. So I ended up getting my master's degree in social work and then became a clinical therapist. And so most of my work has been with trauma survivors. Not all. I also help with depression, anxiety, and of course those symptoms increase with trauma as well. But I've also worked a lot with the military here in the United States as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, yeah, I find our work is challenging, but I can't do anything else. It's definitely meant for me.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm about to do some work with a charity, not-for-profit in Australia that is really working to support those dealing with past and present violence. And I'm excited. It's for women and girls. And yeah, I'm so excited to start that work. And I'm not a therapist, but I'm an educator who has had a lifetime of personal development and experience. I sort of come from the other way. But yeah, it's an amazing area to work in. And I think more and more I'm leaning towards becoming more trauma informed and in my work.
Yeah, I think you've got a great start there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, Elena, I really appreciate you being on today, and I hope that you keep in contact with us.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.